Monster presents Heard on Thursdays, the iconic radio talk show that made Philippine FM radio talk. Winner of multiple KBP Golden Dove Awards. HOT. Heard on Thursdays. Your host, Nikki Porter.
Hey, good evening, monsters, and welcome to the show that made Philippine FM radio talk. That is Heard on Thursdays on the Monster. And of course, this is your host this evening, Nikki Porter. So when you think about the Philippines, one of the things that might come to mind, like one of the first things that you would probably think of is Christianity, which we can attribute to, Spanish colonization for 333 years, as we've learned in school. And it also being like the fifth largest Christian country in the world. But if we look at pre-colonial history, our ancestors had a very different way of life. The Philippines may be rooted in Christianity now, but our spiritual curiosity knows no bounds. And there are so many things about the Philippines, especially in pre-colonial times, so we can actually appreciate if we actually learn about it now. So if you look closely, you can actually find some traces of other influences from outside what we know. And one of those things is Hinduism, which is very interesting. And you, at first, you're going to question, it's like, how is that even possible? Well, the thing is, there are some influences in our own history. Pre-colonial, let's think about that, for example. So, from ancient trade routes to shared symbols and stories as well. And now, purely from the perspective of someone who's very curious and very fascinated by history, especially our own, especially learning these new things in this day and age, I am inviting to the show Hindu seeker and tarot reader, you may know him already, Marky Mendoza. So he is a tarot reader, as we all know. We would usually go in and invite as well for our predictions episodes late into the year for the coming new year. But now he would like to share a little bit of insight with regard to how this way of life or how this practice is actually tethered to our pre-colonial ancestry or that history and that particular culture as well. So without further ado, Heard on Thursdays, let's welcome to the show Marky Mendoza. Hello.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening to our listeners. And Nikki, it's really such a pleasure to be here again. Namaskar or namaste to everyone.
Yes. So first of all, I do want to ask this, without, I guess revealing too much, but
Yeah.
like Hindu seeker, why did you decide to label yourself in that way?
A seeker, just like what we're going to be discussing today, it will always start with curiosity. And there will always be questions that can somehow limit you with certain answers. Or somehow, when we talk about that satisfaction or that fulfillment, when you are asking for something and then you feel that the answer satisfies you, of course, it can lead you towards another question. But more often, also according to my own personal experiences into my journey into awakening, into spirituality, it's always about questions that always lead to some answers that until now fascinated to know that it's not just my journey that's included in understanding our roots.
Yeah.
My journey can be a very good example because I tried to ask questions and I wanted to satisfy that hunger for wisdom and for knowledge. And because I am also a teacher, I would always open myself to any form of wisdom that can allow me to share light and wisdom as well. Being Hindu opens so many ways, but most importantly, I learned how to appreciate our own culture because of it.
Okay, that's a very interesting way of putting it as well, because again, we would never associate one with the other.
Correct.
Right? So let's start with the basics and we can just dive straight in. So what are some of the examples, as you have mentioned before, or how I've actually mentioned it also in the introduction? There are some influences of Hinduism in pre-colonial Philippines, which sometimes we actually don't know that we are practicing today, or it's actually rooted in Hinduism. So what are some of these examples, like, in terms of culture, in terms of philosophy, that still exists in daily life?
Correct. Now, when you've touched on many things, and you will be surprised that it's mostly in everything that we do, even in the words that we speak, in the traditions that we still, up to this day, we follow. It can be those strict traditions, but it can all be those things that we can easily brush aside because we don't really believe in them in
Mhm.
terms of superstition.
Yeah.
But not just that, in terms of way of life as well. So let us group them so that we can also enjoy these little details one by one.
Yeah.
But a little background of it is so that people, if people are going to ask how this actually happened in the first place, this actually predates the 7th century because of the Southeast Asia trade that's happening.
Yeah.
And from that period on 7th century up to, you'll be surprised, from 300 to 1800 common era or CE, we also have in the whole stretch of Southeast Asia, all doing trade, we have our lingua franca, or what we
Yeah.
call our mother tongue.
Yeah.
It's actually Sanskrit as a universal way to communicate from each other. And that is also surprisingly one of the reasons why, when you look closely at the language, the culture, the food, there will always be one common thing, one way or another. We talk about Bali, Indonesia, Malaysia, even the influences are already there, most especially in words. There are many words that are in roots are actually Sanskrit. So I'll be happy to go through. I listed down the significant ones, the ones that we don't really recognize. And me, as a practicing Hindu, I sometimes hear, "Did he say that right? I thought that was Filipino." And then I was always surprised by how rich the words that we use.
Yeah.
So one of them is, when we talk about guru, our teachers.
Guru.
It's a guru.
Yeah.
And the thing about Sanskrit, these are all syllables or sounds that are grouped together, very similar to how the Filipino language, but the Baybayin
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
But when we talk about in Sanskrit, to combine these words or sounds rather, gu meaning guru is remover of darkness.
That's what it means.
That's what it literally means. Through what? What does a teacher do to remove darkness? Through wisdom and knowledge. Because also for Hindus, the eternal battle is not really about good or evil. It's not about the eternal battle between that, but rather wisdom versus ignorance. The more you know, the lesser you will fear. And the more that you understand, the more that it would lead towards wisdom. So teachers are always front and center in sharing clarity. Hence that those two sounds combined together, guru, which we all adapted as guru.
Yeah.
All
And I also just want to add to that right now, like what you said right now is very important to what it is that we're talking about today, because there's a lot of things that we don't know about that should we educate ourselves upon, like allows us to be enlightened and a little bit more like understanding of, and more appreciative actually, of where our roots actually stem from.
correct.
Yeah.
And there are also easy words like likha is actually Sanskrit. Mukha is actually
Really?
Sanskrit. Yes. And when we do our Hindu prayers, when we chant our mantras, there are always mentions of mukhi or mukha. It's just, and I was like, I always have to, and because I am still continuously learning
Yeah.
Sanskrit as we speak, most especially how we pray it, it's always understand, what does this mean? But here is another important reminder about Sanskrit. Because it's too ancient, literally translating it into English is truly an effort. So we may only come close to its definition.
Yeah.
Specifically, like when we talk about the Filipino language, we talk about budhi. Budhi does not have a very specific English translation, but when we talk amongst each other, we know with the common Tagalog slang that we would use, ang itim ng budhi natin. Okay, maitim ang budhi. Okay, but then again, you translate it into literal English, it would really take effort, and you can only come close to it.
Yeah.
But budhi is also the same meaning when it comes to Sanskrit. And we also, and again, that's just one. When we talk about the language, it has always been there. But now we transition to something that is embedded into us. Like, I'm pretty sure. But I'm not sure how you experience it. But when I was younger, and me and my friends, because I grew up in Laguna, there will always be some superstitions. Like for example, and when I was younger, I'm really that naughty. I would just urinate everywhere. I mean, and we know
Yeah.
as Filipinos, that is a no-no.
Mhm.
That's a no-no because we also respect that there are also some elementals or possibly some spirits, seen or unseen,
Yeah.
that are also can be affected, and that is a way to honor and to respect these beings. We say tabi-tabi po.
Yeah.
And I dare you, when I asked yes many times over when I was young, "San galing? Where do we get this?"
Mhm.
And then I would always usually ask an elderly, and I will always get the same answer, and they will say, "Sabi ng matatanda," or the
Yeah.
elderly will always
It's
say
just
it.
the way it's been. Yeah.
And also, I tell you, and I am when I was preparing for this, I was also laughing just because, and I bet you when they were younger, they asked the same question.
Yeah.
They may have asked another elderly, and they may have mentioned the same thing. That
Yeah.
is because it's the elderly who did so, and this is something that we honestly don't have, because right now in a day and age we're in science and technology and the advancements we're in, we really need to stay true to our facts.
Mhm.
We have to make sure that whatever information we absorb is of course
Right.
factual. Now, right now, is it really factual that these beliefs are like set on stone? That when you, I mean, following or not following such will also create something? We really don't know, but there's something inside of us, and I caught myself doing the same thing when I was out in nature, and I
Mhm.
really have to do so. I have to respect nature as well.
Yeah.
It really is something that we do.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of mythology, our ancient mythology,
Mm.
when we talk about
Si
our
Bathala.
Bathala. Oh my gosh, Bathala.
We still say bahala na si Bathala,
I was gonna
diba?
say,
That
that's
was the
line up.
origin of Batman, diba?
Correct. Yung bala na si Batman, but it's actually Bathala na.
Ah.
In short, let God take care of it.
That makes sense. Yeah, now that rings a
We
bell for
we of
sure.
course in the
Yeah.
modern time we inserted the Batman too, because it's a local slang.
Yeah, it's
and it also
colloquial now.
rhymes. It
Yeah.
also rhymes. It's a local slang, but at the same time, everybody uses it. Everybody, bahala na. But
Yeah.
what we really mean when we say bahala na is bathala na.
Yeah.
Let God do it. Or I leave everything to God.
Mm.
Bathala is actually one of the names of Lord Shiva. Lord,
Oh.
or Bathara.
Interesting.
Also, another form, the wife or the female aspect of Batara,
Mhm.
Tara,
Mm.
goddess Tara, or also Tara is also in Sanskrit star, or what we locally know as
Tala.
Taala.
Yeah.
See, it's really embedded in us, and it's really something that has always been part of our nature. Now, here is one important thing. When we talk about the elders, traditionally, what we usually do when we meet elders is to ask for their hand.
Mhm.
We do the mano po.
Yeah.
We do the mano po. You will be surprised that Southeast Asians also have a very similar practice, but the root of it is coming from the Hindu tradition of touching of the feet.
Mm.
When you touch the feet of our elderly, they will in return give you a blessing.
Yeah.
Now, locally, what do we do when we ask the elderly for mano po? What will the elderly you normally say? Kawaan ka ng Diyos. God bless you.
Mm-mm.
Now, why does touching the feet matter most especially? Because the feet, remember, we respect the journey of the elderly.
Ah,
There is so much reverence with the journey of an elderly that you touch the feet because their feet have taken them there.
mm.
So you honor the journey, you honor the experience, and in return, you ask for a blessing and you get blessed in return. In Sanskrit, we call this prasida. When you give, so shall you receive, and when you receive, so shall you give. Just literally like how our traditions, and because we're Southeast Asians, again, also paired with our culture and our own traditions, and maybe it's because it's hard to reach down to the feet, and now you just reach
Yeah.
out for the hand. But it's not again limited to there are also Southeast Asians who also do the same. And again, this is all, again, if you're going to check, it's because of the trade that happened as early as 7th century, 9th and 10th century Sri Vijaya,
Yeah.
and even the Chola dynasty. In the Chola dynasty,
Chola dynasty is from where?
India.
India. Okay.
And this is around 9th and 10th century.
Uh-huh.
You will be surprised that there is a brass plate, golden brass plate, with because during the time of the years that I mentioned, as the lingua franca is Sanskrit, the way we also communicate in writing initially is Sanskrit. Now it turned into Kawi script.
Mm.
Now we adapted it as Filipinos. We adapted into our baybayin.
Mm.
Now, during those times, in when I mentioned earlier the Chola dynasty, there is a breastplate that has a recording that it was retrieved that a merchant was paying a Filipino merchant, and it was through the breastplate. And in that record, it was named. Our country was named. It's the original one is Mahardika, or what we know as Maharlika,
Yeah.
the land of the nobles,
Yeah.
or the land of nobility.
Mhm.
Now, here is culturally, when we talk about history as well, if we ask ourselves, who are we as Filipinos? Who are we as Filipinos?
Right.
What are we, traditions and beliefs as Filipinos?
Yeah.
And when you ask people right now, again, like just like how you mentioned earlier, the primary era that we can consider, it's because of course one major factor is always going to be the colonization. But
Yeah.
if you, again, as a seeker, I ask myself, so who are we before this happened?
Mm.
Who are we? What are our practices? And as a nation, how do we fully identify?
Mm.
And because like right now we are very keen in self-discovery, as a nation we can also do that, so that we can also be at peace and not second guess some things that are very natural to us.
Yeah.
And it's definitely acceptable,
Yeah.
culturally, traditionally acceptable.
Mhm.
It's just always about finding that clarity and that understanding.
For sure. Yeah.
And for me, knowing all this, it also allows me to see further that, hey, there was a time that our people were also called Indios, but we were called Maharlikas.
Mm.
We are noble people.
I think it was a matter of perspective, no, and who called whom.
And
what.
correct.
Diba?
And but then again, and us Filipinos, we turned it into something more meaningful. We called
Right.
it Indios Bravos because we
Yeah.
take pride of who we are.
Yeah.
And if you also ask Filipinos, because of those the past that we have, here is something that I recognize as well. Joking aside, you call a Filipino atapang atao because of the bravery that we have, because we fought well.
Mhm.
For what? We fought well for our freedom, because not just about our freedom, because we fight with dignity, because we are people with dignity as Maharlikas.
Mhm.
We are very noble people. And that is something that we should never forget, that we too are very noble people. We are something. And that's what our national heroes, and I like how I watched movies before like Gumbursa, wherein it's always said that the Filipino iba ka, like you are strong, you're intelligent, you're
Yeah.
talented, and that's who we are as Filipinos. And it's only a matter of really rediscovering them all.
Absolutely. And I actually, going through this, and I understand that, there was a Southeast Asian trade route going to and from the Philippines, and that's how we were introduced as well to Hinduism. I'm kind of wondering then, because one of the ways Hindu practices probably could have proliferated in the Philippines was if they had settlements here.
Correct.
Right. So were there settlements here?
Yes, there have been settlements, and just like how there and I would say this is not something that is very new as a practice, because just like how sometimes us Filipinos, we are looking for opportunities.
Mhm.
We are looking, most especially if we are talented Filipinos, we know that we can have better use of our talents. And
Mhm.
I feel like it's the same. It was the same thought as before. So yes, and it was also clearly for opportunity. It was also clearly to also spread the tradition, and to
Yeah.
also, and it was a clear opportunity for you to also connect with other people, which is also a very you know how Filipinos are always say we're very welcoming, and we're very we're very
Hospitable.
hospitable and very approachable. It is because it is deep seated in our culture as a nation. We truly are very welcoming.
Mhm.
And because of that, I mean, during the era we are trading, we always welcome everybody with open arms. Most especially if you are here to share something, most especially in trade.
Yeah, because it was
Textile.
bartering lang at that time. So
Correct.
it's like it was one thing in exchange for another. So whatever it was that they gave the merchant, it was solely like culturally of importance.
Correct.
Yeah.
And speaking of trade before, when you talk about the one of the major things that being traded before is the textile. So Hindu textiles are really amazing, the patterns. But then again, we talk about Southeast Asia, the countries of Southeast Asia also going through the same trade. That's why one of the things that you would also similarly see are some patterns and prints, like when we talk about batik.
Sure, yeah.
Batik is something that is also very present there, along with those beautiful handcrafted flowers, especially. It's also prevalent in India. But then again, it's something that because of trade and then how we also get to adapt, mixing it with our own tradition and culture, then we come up with something of our own flavor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now that we discuss this, now it makes you think that our tradition, our culture is very rich.
It is.
It's very rich. And here is one funny part. And as an energy healer myself, and as a natural healer myself, I'm always fascinated still, like even in this modern time and age we're in, you know how sometimes when we are in rough times, when we are experiencing some health challenges, okay, one way or another, we will consider anything and everything so that we can get the resolution that we need. It's still part of our culture wherein we would still ask natural healers, like our local friendly neighbor manggagamots, our albularios. We still do the tawas. We honestly don't have any, like, unlike the doctor science with lab tests, etc., tools. We don't have that because again, part of our culture, we we maximize everything that we have in our nature. So what we see, even if in a modern time, is because there can be some advancements, but it's still something that's very natural for us to consider. Why not? Walang mawawala. I mean, anything that it takes for us to get that healing that we need. I mean, sometimes we consider them even in a modern time and age. But you again are going to be surprised that this is something. And we talk about natural healing methods. We have Ayurveda from the Hindus, which is something was also shared during the time that we are going through as early as 7th century.
Did that translate into any practice that we do now as Filipinos?
You are absolutely correct. And you'll be surprised, even the word kulam is actually coming from the word Sanskrit kolam, which is manifesting, like a prayer, manifesting it through writing. So whatever you want to manifest, you put it in writing, which is called kolam. Or then we adapt it as kulam. It's like the intention by itself.
Yeah.
So these natural practices, and also along with our strong beliefs. Again, when we talk about how there's always our mutual respect towards nature, and actually this is something that I still see everywhere. Actually, like most especially, I see food street vendors. Now, when they open their shop, the first thing that they do, they call this locally the atang. So before you sell it, you offer something, and you offer it to either your ancestors or things that are unseen, but can be there, that you coexist. It's like offering. And this is something that is deep-seated in our culture called atang. And this is something as well that to honor those that we don't see but we respect, because it's something that we naturally do.
Yeah. I think it's really wonderful, like even in the span of like 27 minutes or so. FYI, Marky, I've only asked one question, but we talked about
Oh my God.
so much. I'm not even joking. But I think that's the beauty of this. It's like kind of like going where the conversation goes. And there's so much of it that has already been discussed, even without asking the questions, because we just naturally went there. So I also do want to ask in terms of other practices like that you can try and recall, like that are closely related to Hinduist practices.
That strong belief in karma.
I know that there's yung karma pasa sa iba. Oh, why, diba? there is that, right?
Yes.
It's like you don't want the bad karma to get to you. So
Yeah.
you do this little practice that you don't even know if it's gonna work or not.
Yeah. But then we talked about cola. So karma, it's something, but as a Hindu, let me also take this opportunity to also clarify, because we don't want to like mislabel just karma by something that is negative.
Yeah,
Okay, like
because karma is actually good.
now when
Like
we
there's
talk
two
about in
sides.
Sanskrit, when we
Yeah.
talk about very good, when we talk about karma, the literal translation of Sanskrit of karma is action.
Mm.
So going back to science and Newton's third law of motion, in every action, there's always going to be an unequal
Mhm.
reaction.
Mhm.
Okay, so in when we talk about action, it will never be separated from reaction, because that's again a universal law. That's why when we talk about something that's universal, any part of the world you apply the same theory, it would still yield the same answer. So universally, it's true. So action will never be separated with reaction.
Mm.
So, but commonly in Filipinos, we would always say, and I'm quoting my partner for this, and he's watching, baby.
Shout out.
That's not part of the script, but I took it
No,
anyway.
go for it. Go.
So my partner would always, ayan, yeah. My partner would always say, you commonly hear it when sometimes, or sometimes out of anger, or sometimes when we watch TV, and she said, makarma ka sana.
Mm.
And thinking that it would be something that would manifest something that's negative.
Mhm.
But again, if it's when we talk about action and reaction, even the blessings that you have right now, the blessings that you are experiencing, the wealth, the health, and all the fabulous things that you are also experiencing are all because of karma. It's neither good and bad. It's
Mhm.
the reflection of what action and reaction is.
Mm.
And binaklapan natin, we call it Karmi Martin, which is more
That I've never heard of, but okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
very gay. Happy Pride. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride, everybody.
Okay. Well, okay. So that's very interesting for sure. Because it's like, and it feeds into our superstitious beliefs, right? The
Correct.
whole purpose
Correct.
of like karma. So it's a very interesting concept, of course, that we practice. And there's just so many things, I guess, that you mentioned also the what do you call this? The equivalent of likha and what was the other one?
Mukha.
Mukha, right? Because like when you mentioned those, I was like, oh, actually, that's right. Because you have Sikh in
Yes, that's also part of it.
right? So it's like
Correct.
an SIKH. So it's a very like the spelling it in itself. You're saying it's actually borrowed
Correct.
from Hinduism.
And we basically adapted into it because we are also as Filipinos who are very welcoming. Again, we are here very hospitable,
Mhm.
and with hospitality we also learn how to adapt because we want to also, we're naturally people pleasers. And I remember I love having trips in Bangkok, Thailand, because it's also one good place for us Hindus, because half populations are Buddhists,
Mm.
but there are also populations that are Hindu.
Right.
So when we talk about, we have more temples to visit there at least. And initially I was intimidated. Can I learn the language? Will I have the opportunity to learn the language? I was very intimidated, but I tell you, the more that you practice it, as Filipinos, in Filipino slang, we call it malambot ang dila. Like our tongue can
Right.
easily adapt into it. And because again, we have fully adapted even Sanskrit in our natural words. And me as a Filipino now being able to adapt to how our tongue clicks when we pray, at least when I ask my Hindu guru, Gurudev, is my pronunciation right? Because you have to say it right. So,
Right.
is it correct? Okay, very good. Because I owe that to our Filipino roots. Because of that, we became more adaptable when it comes to even language.
Yeah, for sure. And also, while we're on the topic of language, I'm trying to recall like how Sanskrit looks, and then now I'm kind of wondering if there is some correlation at all with our alibata.
You are correct. I was too excited.
Yes.
You're correct. And remember, it was initially Sanskrit, and then as we are adapting it as the common tongue during that time, also the writing became kawi.
Mhm.
And then it turned into the baybayin. So yes, and as you can see, there are also similarities when it comes to how it's written.
Yeah.
The shapes and sizes, it's very similar to how Sanskrit is written.
Yeah. So it's really like that. Actually, that was the first thing I thought of also, because when you were talking about, all the other ways like Hinduism has influenced our culture, I was like thinking like Alibat looks kind of similar
Yes.
to Sanskrit, because it's also, also like Alibata is such a, it's a very cool cursive
Correct.
alphabet, right? Because it's like, because now once you learn about it in school, it's like, okay, so spell your name in Alibata, right? We have that whole
Correct.
practice also. And then some of us will also like have it tattooed because it's very
Yeah.
important to us. Like it's like, oh, this is
Correct.
my
Our
roots.
roots.
Yes,
Correct.
yes.
And there's such pride remembering it.
You're right.
And
Yeah.
and and now that we mentioned it, and you're correct, it's and now that we have, of course, the very famous Apo Wang Od, who also gives
Yes.
those, you see the, it's actually the journey as in our current time. It really fascinates me that um it's because again we are very adaptive
Mhm.
in nature, so we, whatever is whatever the current time presents, we are always welcoming on that. But
Yeah.
as a Filipino, like right now more than ever, it's a very good opportunity. And Dr. Jose Rizal has always been mentioning this in his books. Remember, in Filipino he would say, ang taong hindi lumingon sa pinanggali wika, papahiya ako doon sa
Kaya mo yan.
ay masangsang pa sa masangsang isda. If you don't remember the
Yeah,
wika,
yeah,
okay?
yeah, yeah.
But it's not just the language. It is not only about remembering our language, but us as Filipinos, our whole being as Filipinos, and to be at peace with it, to be very much at peace with that, without thinking, or will I get punished if I still believe in these things,
Mm-hmm.
or will I get punished if I still get, or if I don't believe in these things as
Mm.
well, what will happen to me? But somehow the common decision will say, like, if you're also like me, I would still, I'd rather just adapt. I'd rather just do it. When we talk about the beliefs and superstition, it still
Right.
says tabi-tabi po. And this is really something that when we go back to the roots and the rich culture of Hindus as well, and it's such a huge country with such vast history, and most especially in the way of worship. This is also one good example of it. In There are many ancient civilizations and ancient like the Mayans, the Aztecs,
Mm.
they worship the sun. They
Yeah.
will always have a sun god, a name of a sun god. Also the Egyptians,
Yes.
Ra,
Yes.
okay, the sun god. But if you also remember, in Filipino, we also do have that. Hari, we call him Haring Araw.
Mm.
And I'm a fan. Shout out to the Batang 90s. I'm a very good fan of Batibot. It's really,
Oh, okay.
I'm I love Batibot. I love Sesame Street.
Yeah.
I love Batibot because it's really close to our hearts. And I remember that just watching it, it really allows you to become more proud as a Filipino,
Mm.
using the language,
Mhm.
telling stories in Filipino. It gives
Mhm.
you that spark, it gives you that pride and
Yeah.
joy as well. And now that you understand that our culture is rich, what is there to not love about us?
Absolutely. And I want to add also, like, I feel like another influence, I'm not sure at all, but then um often a little bit of a tangent actually. I read somewhere that, Filipinos are so like, we, like, there has been a prevalent trend of, like, having tattoos and all
Hmm.
these things, and it's kind of like, and I used to be against it. I was like, no, I want to keep my skin clean or something. I still don't have tattoos, but then now I actually get the understanding. And then I saw somewhere online saying that actually, in terms of, like, because some people will also still have that school of thought that, no, why do
Mm.
you have tattoos? You're gonna be wrinkly and whatever and all these things. And then uh, someone had a rebuttal saying, actually, if you think about it, in our pre-colonial times, how people actually called, or I feel like it was the Spanish who described us when they landed on our shores, Las Islas de los Pintados,
Mhm.
and it basically just said the people, the land of the painted people.
Correct.
Right. So it's like, these things. So it's like reclaiming
Correct.
our identity and our
Correct.
culture as well.
Correct.
And it's just, and I think that's really beautiful, because it's like, oh, we shouldn't be so afraid
Yeah.
of that. So, and I was wondering also, since we're on the topic of tattoo, was there some influence because henna is
Correct. Absolutely.
popular?
Culturally, it will always be present because it's part of the ritual, because of your skin is a part
Mm.
of who you are.
Mm-mm.
And
Yeah.
also, most especially, this also indicates, just like the ring,
Mhm.
it indicates if the woman is married or not.
Oh, okay. I
Yes.
never knew that. I just thought
Yes.
like, oh, that looks nice. Because I had
Mhm.
someone do henna on me before, but I was like
Mhm.
a teenager at the
There
time.
there are specific patterns for the bride, and it's a very rich symbolism, but of
Mm.
course it's mostly for fertility, abundance and prosperity,
Mm.
harmonious married life. So it's very
Yeah.
symbolic, and imagine having them written on your skin, a skin that's part of who you are, that you get to embody in a ritual
Mm.
that's witnessed by divinity. So
Yeah.
it's such a very rich experience as well. And I'm pretty sure if you've also looked at the grandest wedding last year of the richest Hindu
Oh,
family,
right. Yes,
the
that's right.
Ambanis.
Yes.
And traditionally, if somehow we get to think that, isn't it a bit that grand? Like, do we really have to celebrate wedding that long?
Mm.
That's how, according to the Hindu traditions,
Is it
are.
7 days or something?
It's a minimum. The
Oh,
minimum,
wow.
correct? The minimum. And the Ambanis, the what I do love about that experience about the Ambanis is because they always made sure
Mhm.
that in the process of them giving the tradition, they would always have a strong charity work. And one of the charity works that they did, the Ambanis did, it's a little off topic, but they allowed 1,008 couples that are having hardships, financial
Mm.
hardships, to get married. They
Wow.
sponsored 1,008
Because they
newlyweds.
could.
And because it's part of the ritual that can
Is
also give
it?
back. Correct. It's part of the ritual because we talk about prasida prasida. As
Yeah.
you give, so
Oh,
shall you
okay.
receive.
Okay.
And a wedding is what they're asking for. So they want to grant that equally to
Mm.
others as well who are less fortunate to experience
Is
it.
that the same thing as is that also a practice of karmic reactions and
Absolutely
all these
correct. And
things?
because us as Hindus, we fully believe that nothing is coincidental,
Mm.
everything is karmic. And that
Interesting.
is how somehow we get to now appreciate, because when we talk about the principles
Mhm.
of being Hindu, there are five principles that we mostly, as Hindus, it's we can also simply put it as our commandments,
Yeah.
like that. And
Right.
but the first is to always make sure that you worship a form of divinity,
Mm.
that you honor a form of divinity, no matter how it resonates. It can be Jesus, it can be
Mhm.
Mama Mary, because I'm I love Mama Mary. I've always been drawn to a motherly form of divinity,
Right.
and even when I was younger, it's always been Mama Mary. No matter how this form of divinity resonates, and if you find that form of divinity in science and technology, I mean, it's amazing because
Mm.
science has given so much clarity nowadays.
Yeah.
It really it really really clears up so many things, most especially in terms of knowledge and wisdom. So if you are someone who honors, by all means.
Mm.
So the next one is to always honor nature and to take care of nature.
Mm.
And we are always reminded of this, between nature and humankind. If we remove humankind in the picture, of course nature will still survive, but
Yeah.
you remove nature, mankind will never
Yeah.
survive. So it is always part of our principles. So one way or another, always
Mm-mm.
help nourish nature.
I have a question regarding that. So, what happens then if you see a flying epis?
Oh my god, oh my gosh.
How do we
And
how do we honor nature?
me being before not as a Hindu, we know
Yeah.
what to do. Filipinos would know
Yeah.
what to do.
Right. Right.
And it's just because we know that it's also different when you get to experience a flying one. And
Mm.
now it's an emergency button. You have to, if it's a flying cockroach, it's a different story, right? Me answering before as a Hindu, I do what Filipinos would do.
Mhm.
But now, of course, as a Hindu,
How do you react now?
everything is about karma. And I think
Yeah.
and here is one good thing that, and we I don't want us to always just feel guilty about it, most especially if it's not naturally also part of our culture. Like, you know how sometimes these happens in a form of an accident as well. Maybe you're just in your yard and then maybe you stepped on an ant
Yeah.
hill,
Yeah.
or in Filipino we call it nunu sa punso, which, by
Mm.
the way, is a nunu sa punso is also part of what I listed earlier. In the
Mm.
Hindu beliefs, it's actually called And you know how what the elderly would say, never step on it, never disturb it, never do
Yeah.
anything with it.
Right.
Because in the Hindu tradition, that's considered as Lord Shiva, his formless, as a Shiva Lingam.
Langgam.
Until amazing. Yeah. So
Interesting.
but now when we talk about these things, sometimes it just happens in an accident, and sometimes we can't also just punish ourselves with things that are, we didn't really intend to do.
Mm.
Okay, but here is where awareness and mindfulness comes in. And there are really times wherein I mentioned earlier, if it's an emergency, but every single being has consciousness. We just don't know it, but everything has consciousness.
Mhm.
And why everything has consciousness? Because everything that you see in existence all came from that one same spark of divinity. In science, we call it, again, the Big Bang Theory.
Mhm.
So as human beings, we are also gifted with compassion.
Mhm.
And as beings of compassion, that's also one of the first things that we get to experience and to share.
Yeah.
Now, with, again, awareness and mindfulness, we can choose.
Mhm.
But if it's already here, I mean, sometimes we
Right.
panic,
Yeah.
like that. But I would always say that there will be always times like we say, is it necessary for me
Mm.
to do so?
Yeah.
And let's say if there is a way for me to not create harm, do I still choose to create harm?
Mm.
If I have an opportunity to just, choose compassion,
Mhm.
kindness, and humility, which is also the next when we talk about our principles, because the next one is always about um, always having that compassion with one another,
Mm.
or to always respect and honor one another, because no man is an island, one way or another. And I was reminded beautifully by my partner again. I did it again because we were really excited about this topic for tonight. But sometimes we take everything for granted. Let's say when we talk about the food that we eat,
Yeah.
before it landed on your lap, it has gone through the hands of many hardworking people,
Fair enough.
and that's
Yeah.
how it all connects us. And you don't know. I mean, if you're also a fan of international food,
Mm.
it landed on your lap, but it came from the hands of the beautiful, hardworking
right,
people
yeah.
from where it came from. And that connects us all. So that we depend on each other to survive. We
Mm.
just don't recognize it.
Yeah.
And so that's how beautiful when we get to consider many things on a very minute detail.
Mm.
We get to experience divinity in
Yeah.
everything, which is um, after that, we always must remember that we also have to respect. What's in my list here?
Mhm.
Because the last one is here, to take care of our ancestors. I mentioned it earlier that just like how we honor the elderly,
Mm.
we owe our existence to our ancestors, each one of us.
Yeah.
That's why we always have to remember them. Us Filipinos, we have a day for that. But a day wherein we remember our dearly departed. But in India, they celebrate it for one whole month.
Mm.
So the final principle that we will always have is to always respect and honor knowledge and wisdom.
Mm.
Because again, I will always say this: the more you know, the lesser you will fear.
That's true. Yeah. And I think it's really like, so this conversation, of course, like, you learn so much, even in so little time, with regard to our culture, with regard to, a religion that you didn't think had any ties to our culture, because we've always known that, for 333 years, we have taken on Christianity and its traditions as well. But if you go pre-colonial, it has been passed on in spite of that. So I think it's a really beautiful thing, and how it still thrives. And I think it also is nice to give it. It's good to give it some appreciation as well, for us to be able to know, like, just how rich, like you said, how rich our culture is. Now, I want to ask about this question as well, because I think it's interesting, because we have festivals, right? We
Yes.
have so many festivals like Dinagyang or Sinulog or something. I think Sinulog is the one that's like colorful, is it?
Correct.
Not sure.
It is very colorful, but the
Yeah.
sinulog is mostly the celebration for the Santo Niño.
That's right.
Correct.
Okay. Because I was wondering, like, if it's colorful, it's like, it kind of reminds me of
Holly.
the Holly. Yes, the one with the colored powder.
Correct. And
Yes.
it's also, we also have, well, we do fun runs as well, and we do
Yes,
share the colors.
yes,
So it
yes.
also is, and Hindus are not gonna be, whoa, we you didn't celebrate. In fact, Hindus celebrate it when we get to see it, because, and I will always say this, we always are open for conversations because it always connects us all, and how amazing it is
Mm.
that we get to share these experiences, relate to each other,
Mhm.
and then finally discover, hey, I have something similar.
Yeah, yeah.
I have something similar, and and most especially while me and my partner are really doing more research about this, we find ourselves laughing because why haven't we thought about this?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and for me as a Filipino, when I'm outside of the country, I always take pride when I say, most especially, Thais are very appreciative, most
Mhm.
especially if you're Asian and you somehow try to learn the language and you try to speak it. Of course, it would sound funny for them, but
Yeah.
all the more you get more discount. I'm telling you, go to Chatuchak, you say, lot dai mai ka. You say, ask for a discount.
Oh, okay,
You ask
okay.
for a discount. And then,
Mhm.
of course, you will sound funny, but for them, I I
The
I I,
effort
I
was
love how
there.
you try, and they appreciate
Yeah,
it
yeah.
because here's the thing, when there's humility, that you try to reach out and you give
Mhm.
efforts for yourself, and one way or another happy person would truly appreciate that. And that's another, again, Southeast Asian country. And so I am reminded that no matter where I go, I'm actually very proud of my roots.
Mm.
I'm proud that now I am Hindu, but I am more proud that I am Filipino.
I love that. I love it that you're saying it. How many days? 7 days before our Independence Day.
It is.
Diba?
It is. It is. And how amazing is that? How amazing
Yeah,
is that?
yeah.
It really fascinates me continuously, and I really want to say this, that even before we started, I was really wanting to really give a very good show, and as happy as I sound right now, you'll be surprised, there's actually more.
Yeah, I'm
There's
sure.
more. And so, as a Hindu seeker as I am, I invite everybody, those curious minds, those
Yeah,
hungry for wisdom and knowledge. It's just a matter of staying open.
yeah.
It's just a matter of opening your heart and your mind. And I will
Mm.
say that knowledge is always amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, on that note as well, it's like, this is something, again, it just gives us so much more insight on our identity also. And it's a very timely conversation that we're having as well. Now, like, we do have like 10 minutes into the show left, but I do want to ask a couple more questions, because I'm pretty sure that there could be some indigenous peoples that could maybe have some practices that they've taken from Hinduism. Kaya, would you know if there's any?
In terms of practices, I can, well, in the spiritual practice as well.
Mm.
This is actually adapted, not just by Filipinos, but there are many, even religion or belief systems have adapted to it.
Mm.
And when we talk about a Hindu, a Hindu's way of praying,
Yeah.
okay, and there is one belief system in the Hindu belief system that is very taboo because of some misconceptions, and I'm talking about tantra. Okay, because
Okay.
when we talk about tantra, it will always have the first thing that come, just like similar to karma.
Mm.
We only can scratch the surface, and we will automatically associate it with something that is challenging or something that's negative.
Yeah.
But actually, what it does when we talk about tantra, literally means weave. You weave elements together to produce or to manifest.
Mm.
It's actually a way to manifest through what? Through the natural five elements: earth, air, fire, and wind.
Mm.
So there are other belief systems, other countries, nations who have adapted into this, which eventually became witchcraft. Then again, we go back into our local practices. We call it now kulam.
Kulam.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, interesting. So that's a prevailing practice
Correct.
right now. Okay, very interesting. Marky, thank you so much. Like, it's such a it's a wonderful conversation. And again, it's like I barely asked, questions that I've printed out, but it's covered so much. And I feel like it's covered enough, but I feel like also not enough, because as you said, there was more to the topic, right? So without further ado, was there is there anything else that's kind of like mic drop? Actually, this is something that we've been influenced by Hinduism.
More than the influence and more than the way of life, understanding our own roots, understanding our history, our past, and being at peace with it, it
Mm,
frees us. Just like how an individual person who needs to process all their life experiences and life lessons go through an actual process as well.
right.
And then we always say that if you are healing, before you can actually heal and move forward, it's always about being at peace with what happened in the past,
Mm,
being at peace and being welcoming with what happened and how it may have possibly shaped you as a
mm,
person, but how you utilize that knowledge, and so that you can prepare for a better version of yourself in tomorrow. For me, when I get to understand and embrace that there's more to me as a Filipino, that I'm not just a brave person because of my ancestors are very brave, fought for our freedom,
yeah.
that we are also noble people.
Yeah.
And I consider look at our identity as if we are an onion with several layers.
Yes.
We may have peeled off several layers, but at the
Mm-hmm.
at the very core of an onion,
Mm-hmm.
if you see if it's a red onion, at the very core of it is white.
Mm,
Look deeper.
mm,
I invite everybody to look deeper and to peel off layers and layers of wisdom that you can know until finally you get to rediscover
mm.
who you truly are
Yeah.
and be very proud of it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for saying that, Marky. And finally, also, can we just also acknowledge that this is just one of many influences, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
So it's like, imagine if, there was another speaker that was going to be talking about another influence from
Correct.
another country. It should be unsurprising at this point that,
Correct.
that's how rich our country was, knowing how we are geographically located.
Yeah.
Like we were influenced in so many ways by so many peoples as well. So thank you so much, Marky, for coming by and giving us so much insight on our identities as Filipinos as well. And for the monsters who are listening, thank you also for keeping locked and keeping us company. And I hope you learned a thing or two, or like gained a little bit more appreciation about you as a Filipino. And with that, we end the show. Thank you again, Marky. Before we go, where can monsters find you? Should they have any, other curiosities, other questions that they might want to ask? Like the questions that I was asking at the top of my head when it came to like, so is this and this, like, are they related? That kind of thing.
If you are also a fellow curious person like
Mm.
me, and you would want to also start conversation with me, if you are also curious and you are wanting to ask these questions, you may send these questions. I'm in TikTok as well, so
Mm.
Reiki with Marky in my TikTok. I also post videos and contents about spirituality, mindfulness,
Mm.
and awareness. And if you're also, I'm also a tarot reader and a Reiki master. If you are also needing some services about tarot reading, we have a new formula right now that we are going to spearhead. It's combining tarot cards with Hindu or Vedic astrology all in
Wow.
one package.
Interesting.
So if it's something that interests you, if you have if you are going through something and you need clarity, feel free to reach out. You can again message me in my TikTok. It's Reiki with Marky, or Instagram as well, Reiki with Marky.
All right. Thank you so much, Marky. And good night and take care to all the monsters. But if you guys aren't going anywhere yet, you do have Gail up next for Still So Wild and Wicked till 2 in the morning. So do keep her company for that. And now we are just going back to more music. So any last words? Good night.
Good
Take
night,
care.
everybody, and I want to greet my baby. See you later. I love you, and my cat Kala.
All right. There we go, monsters. Thank you so much. Gail will be up next. Keep it locked only here on The Monster.